Welcome back, ladies, gentlemen, and all else to a brand new video. Man, it feels like a year since I last uploaded. I'll make a little video talking a bit about my break at a later date, rest assured. However, I could not let this channel's tradition of annual Halloween specials go this year. So here we are on Halloween night 2022, as I have collected 10 chilling creepypasta stories from around the internet. Tonight, we shall go through them together. If you find yourself enjoying any of these stories, do go down in the description to find a link to each of them. Make sure you give each author kind and encouraging words for their excellent work. There's no point stalling any further, it's been long enough. For now, we must embark on this journey. Make yourself some coffee or tea, turn the lights down, and let's relax as we go through the top 10 creepypastas of 2022. Enjoy! Number 10. Lake Vostok. In 1963, the US government established a research base on Lake Vostok in Antarctica. The team of engineers and scientists were tasked with drilling into the subglacial lake and researching the life within. A second clandestine reason was its potential use for the military. In 1966, the team began drilling, and by April of 1966, they reported breaking through the ice. The base fell silent. A research operation went underway, but just before its launch in late May 1966, the base sent out one last transmission. The contents of the tape were mostly purged after its reception, but the surviving audio gives a clear warning. Stay away from Lake Vostok. Whatever the contents of the rest of the tape, the US government did something which it had never done before, and which it hasn't done since. It listened. Number 9. Route 963. Should you find yourself driving during the small hours of the morning, long before the sun has shown its face, you should be advised to, at all costs, avoid Route 963. It has no home, so unfortunately you can't avoid it simply by living in the right place. It just kind of pops up. It welcomes wary travelers who wouldn't call it a night and buy a room. If you see it, do not take it. Even if curiosity strikes up the thought, it is not worth it. If for some reason you make the wrong turn, well, you're screwed. Hope and pray you have enough gas to last you a while. If you drive an electric, the same holds true for the vehicle's charge. You are going to need it. You'll quickly notice that Route 963 has no exits, nor pull-offs, nor rest stops, nor gas stations, nor anything. That is because Route 963 is different. Unlike your typical highways, Route 963 is not a means to an end, but rather an end itself. It has nowhere to take you, except to take you. If it was playing previously, your radio will likely pick up a new frequency, a station that plays loud music in an unfamiliar language. Feel free to turn it off, though it won't do you any good. It should be noted at this point that you'll likely begin to panic. Do not stop your vehicle. Do not turn the vehicle around. Do not look in the rearview mirror. Should you do any of these, the results may vary. If you stop and attempt to go back the way you came, you'll be met with a harsh realization. There is no way back. Attempt to drive into the blackness that follows you, and let the spider wrap you in its web. That is exactly what Route 963 wanted in the first place. If the temptation becomes too difficult to bear, remove the rear view mirror entirely. If, however, you do look in the rear view, you'll be met with one of two sights. You may see nothing but blackness. Keep driving. Eventually, it will find you. Or, you may see a dim set of headlights following you. In the event that you do, keep driving. Just hope and pray you don't run out of gas. At least, for a little while. Number 8. Waking Dream. Hello, my name is John and I'm around 20 years old. I've always thought of myself as a fairly ordinary guy, no real health problems or ill fortune to speak of. I have a stable job, good friends, and even began to start dating a few years of being on my own, so what is an ordinary guy like me doing strapped to a table in the middle of some dark room surrounded by nothing but shadows? Instantly, I think on past discussions with friends about sleep paralysis, and it hits me. I was experiencing the very phenomena we had discussed. That's why I couldn't move, and just as my friends had said, I began to hallucinate. Yet, the hallucinations were more vivid than I had imagined. Even with the knowledge of what was going on, I was terrified. The shadows slowly fading to reveal several humanoid beings with chalk-white skin and large almond-shaped eyes that stared at me like pools of black ink. I felt a sharp pain in my wrists and glanced down. To my horror, strange wires began to slide into my skin, moving around inside me as I felt them slide up my arm. Yet I was completely unable to move as the strange beings stood over me and observed silently. The fear was overwhelming now, and I closed my eyes. A cold sweat passed over me as I felt that wire slide further and further until it eventually reached my skull. Then, agonizing pain struck me like electricity and I jerked uncontrollably, my eyes opening as I let out an instinctual cry of pain, as well as fear. As I jerked around, the figures finally closed in and I blacked out. When I awoke, I was in my bed and still shivering as I moved my arm to place a hand over my aching head, having had what I could only assume to be the worst nightmare of my life. It was then I glanced at my wrist and saw something that made my cold sweat come back, my fear returning almost instantly. A small puncture wound right on my wrist. Number 7. A good night's sleep. The sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. Pulse racing, I fumbled through my bedside drawer for my phone, only for my stomach to drop when I realized that I had forgotten to charge it. The paperback novel I'd fallen asleep reading now felt suffocatingly heavy on my chest, and as my vision adjusted to the darkness of my bedroom, I held my breath and listened for intruders. Tense, heart-pounding moments passed, but I heard nothing. No footsteps outside the door, no strange voices whispering to one another, no gloved hands turning doorknobs or rummaging through my home for valuables, save for the low hum of the air conditioner and my cat Lily's gentle breathing as she slept curled up beside me, oblivious to my panic. After several minutes without any further noise or an appearance from a masked burglar, it occurred to me that perhaps the glass sound had merely been the product of my unconscious, overworked mind. Lately, I'd been spending 7 days a week at my office, subsisting on cup after cup of black coffee and combating stress that threatened to eat me alive. What little time I had left for sleep never felt like enough. A weary glance towards my clock revealed that I had precious few hours before the morning alarm rang through my ears and commanded me to begin yet another long day. Exhausted, I closed my eyes and attempted to fall back asleep. But it was no use. I simply couldn't relax. With a tired sigh, I rose from my bed, opened the door, and stepped into the dark hallway. I nearly jumped out of my skin when I stumbled over some of Lily's toys and sent a ball rolling down the hall. Oh, get a grip, I admonished myself. No wonder you're so anxious all the time. I took a deep breath followed by another step and never even noticed the broken picture frame until its shards had already sank into my foot. I shrieked in pain and limped back to my room, peppering the floor with my blood. 15 minutes and multiple crimson-stained tissues later, I managed to stop the bleeding and bandaged my foot before sluggishly climbing back into bed. If I hadn't been so tired, perhaps I would have laughed at the thought of such a spectacle unfolding over something so innocuous as a poorly hung framed photo slipping from its nail and crashing onto the floor. Whew, what a night, Lily, I muttered as I rested my head on my pillow and pulled her close to wrap my arm around her soft white belly. The combination of Lily's warm fur and gentle purring calmed me, and I began to doze off. My eyes flew open when I heard a meow coming from the edge of the bed. I sat up and saw Lily staring back at me, her whiskers wet from a recent trip to the water bowl. The thing beside me began to laugh. Number 6. The window view. The room was unusually cold. I woke up at about 5:30 in the morning. I felt so cold and unusually paranoid. Despite the suffocating darkness that had engulfed my room, I could tell why it was cold. The window was allowing a cold breeze from the Arctic forest that waited outside. This was normal, for it reacted to my dreams. I turned on the light to fight back against the encompassing darkness. As I got out of bed, I noticed something. The world outside the window had become so lifelike. I could hear the sounds of small animals crunching through the soft, powdery white snow. I could smell the several different trees that had come into view. I could see the dim light of the sun behind the clouds that were dispersing large, pillowy flakes. The sound of life outside was overcome by the sound of gusting wind coming from the field, lining the outer edge of the frozen forest. Slowly, I walked towards the window so as to not scare the small, fragile creatures that were scurrying around noisily outside. This window made the image feel, sound, and even smell lifelike. The smells of winter came to my senses then. I smelled the towering pines of that frozen forest, and the subtle smell of other animals that were always near. These things became so lifelike that I, for just an instant, thought that it was real. The sight seemed even more real than the smells. The snow glinted ever so slightly, as the sun peeked from behind the thick layer of white clouds that had blanketed the entire sky. The yellow light of the sun disappeared, almost as fast as it had arrived. It began snowing again, the flakes, slightly larger now, piling on top of one another at an enormous speed. This couldn't have been right. I did not ask the window to do this. Soon, the snow had piled up to the bottom of the window. It seemed all too strange. I began to notice that the flakes had increased in size, even more. Their color had changed to an almost searing white. It hurt to look at the bright color. I saw that the sun had dimmed even more. The forest had become a distant silhouette in the frigid blizzard. Soon, I could not see anything. What conflagration of errors had occurred in this window? I could hear the sounds of those animals again, the crunching of padded feet by brown-colored hares with wiry fur. I heard the chirping of what I could only guess to be a dimly colored finch in a branch that did not seem far away. Then, I heard a growl, a low, hungry growl of something that was most fearsome. A wolf had found its way and was approaching the hare. The sound eventually gave out to the piercing sounds of constant gusts of wind. That was all I heard from that point on. Eventually, I realized that something had gone horribly wrong with the window and decided to turn it off. I reached for the control panel only to find that it had frozen over. That is when I realized how cold it was. It was not a tolerable winter breeze, but rather a frigid, arctic wind that burnt the moment it left its soft kiss on your skin. I leaped for a cover from my thoroughly layered bed to stay warm. After grabbing a blue wool blanket, I began to make for the door. When I had reached the door, I realized that it too had froze. I could not escape. This window, that was supposed to allow you to see anything, had turned into a nightmare that was slowly freezing me to death. I was so cold. The snow then collapsed into my room. This window had turned fiction to reality. Soon I heard the growl of that huge beast again. This time, he came through the window. He was huge, 4 feet in height, and probably weighing in around 200 pounds. He glared his white teeth, and I saw hunger in his eyes. He began prowling ever closer. I hoped for something to unfreeze, for me to wake up from this horrible nightmare. I was so cold. I realized that I could no longer feel my fingers, which had taken a blue hue. My feet were beginning to turn odd colors as well. I could only hope that the deep freezing cold would kill me before that wolf did. If I did not die, at least I would be asleep. Then, my attention was snapped back to the wolf. He had leapt to make his first gruesome kill. Sleep had not given me mercy. Number 5. Floating darkness. Oh, my head. What the hell just happened? Where am I? I remember seeing a flash of light and then everything just went black. Is this a blackout? An electrical outage of some sort? I feel like I'm falling, but my feet are placed firmly on the ground. At least I think it's ground. It's certainly solid. A tiny light, lies ahead. I hear someone calling me to it. I am unsure if I should go towards it, but I feel drawn towards it, like a magnet to metal. I am almost halfway there. Everything's getting brighter. I feel warm, as if someone were holding me in their arms. The light, it's fading away now. I'm being pulled back into the darkness I was just in. A voice calls out to me. Find the key. You will be free. What? What does it mean? What key? Something forcefully pulls me back, and I am back where I saw the flash. I look around, looking for the so-called key. The key is nowhere to be found, but I see someone laying down. There seems to be a red liquid around the body. It looks nearly dried now. I feel compelled to go towards the body. I now have a full view of the body. It looks familiar. There's a metal object in the body's hand. The red liquid looks to come from the body's head. I look at the body. It looks to be male. I look at the face. What I see absolutely terrifies me. The face was my face. I killed myself. Why though? What happened? I am thrust back where I was, into the floating darkness. It seems I found the key, but I'm nowhere near the light again. I don't feel free. You are to spend eternity here, in this floating darkness, in this purgatory. Number 4. In the Rosebush. A long time ago in primary school, there was a rumor being passed around. It's all they would talk about, really. The Rosebush is what the story was called. It was based off of a creepy old rosebush in the courtyard. The rumor said that if you went to the rosebush in the dead of night, when not even the janitor was in the building, and picked one of the roses, someone would come out of the rosebush and kill you. Of course, nothing had happened. At least, nothing had been reported. I decided to check it out one night. After the janitor got into his truck and drove down the lane, I tiptoed over to the bush. The wilting roses shimmered in the pale moonlight, giving off an eerie look. I gingerly plucked a blood-red rose from off of the vines. I stood there in silence, looking at the rose. A minute had passed with nothing happening. I gave up on it and was about to turn away, when I heard a soft singing coming from behind me. I turned around quickly, only to see nothing. Had this been my imagination or something else? It didn't matter. It was late and I had to go to bed. I walked silently back to my apartment when I heard screaming coming from my room. I burst through the door. My mother was down on her knees and sobbing. I walked over to her to ask what was wrong. My father, who was also weeping, put a hand on her shoulder and looked at the bed. I looked up too, wondering what it was. My dead body was lying in the bed. Half of my face was ripped off, and my eyes were nowhere to be seen. The blankets were torn off and ripped. The glass in my window was shattered, as if someone had broken in, but we lived on the 5th floor. The injuries couldn't have been done by a human, or anything even close to one. At the foot of my bed, there was the same blood-red rose I had just picked. Number 3. Don't let him get your toes. As a child, my mother would tuck me in while saying goodnight. As she did so, she would reach down to the end of her bed and tickle my feet, covering them with a blanket. I was always very tall, same as both of my parents, so the blanket always popped up over my feet. My mother smiled as she tucked my feet in. Don't let him get your toes. They make delicious snacks for monsters under the bed. I was always perplexed when she said this, but all I did was smile and ignore it, and I was too busy giggling as she tickled me. Of course, now I am a fully grown adult, and it is my 3rd year of college. It was a frigid winter vacation in the small town that my childhood home stood in. My mother had called me, practically begging me to come visit her and my father in their home. My old home. The home was once a lovely cabin my grandfather had built. It is now a mildew and creature-infested shack that is rotting away by the minute. After a bit of thought, I decided it couldn't hurt to pay her a visit. After driving down the long and bumpy road and forcing open the old door, I walked inside to the stale air and dragged in my bag after me. It was getting dark even though I left at 5:30. "Ma, Pops, I'm home." I walked over to the familiar coffee table that seemed to be covered in dust. Poor old Pops, thinking that my mother in a wheelchair is still going to clean up the house, the bastard. I went to my bedroom and put my suitcase in the closet. I plopped down on my bed and gazed up at my walls. The once yellow walls, sunshine and bright, were now dirty and peeling. Since I was very tired, I dozed off for a bit. I awoke to a startle, sitting up in my bed. There was a jagged pain at the very end of my left foot. I looked down and gasped, agonizing pain coursing through me, alongside with shock as I saw that my foot was bleeding and missing a chunk of its big toe. I froze, unable to make any sound of pain when I saw the terrible monstrous beast at the end of my bed. It had large silver eyes, the size of golf balls, and a bald head. It was pale white, that looked as though it was crab walking with its arms bent over backwards. What was the most gruesome feature was that instead of hands, it had 2 more feet. But all its feet had no toes at all. Its head was turned in a way that was so inhuman that I wanted to be sick. Its mouth were full of teeth that were 3 times the size of human ones, but were still in the same shape, so that it added to the creepy form. It grinned at me, mocking me. It had the gory lump in between its teeth. It hissed and ran out the room. I called the hospital, choking out whatever words I could. I knew the creature would have been gone by then. I just said that I had dropped a knife on my toe. So, the next time you're in bed at night, make sure your feet are covered, because it will get you. So, don't let them get your toes. Number 2. Death and the Emperor. Gather round, Grandma Millie's children. Grandma Millie got an old tale to tell ya, one from long ago. Yes, Billy, from even 'fore Grandma Millie was born. That was quite long ago indeed. There once was much chaos in the land. It rained at all times, and there were no signs of letting up any time soon. Anywho, the humans lived in fear of the gods, who flooded the valleys and canyons with their downpour, forcing us to live in caves and in the mountains. One day, though, a powerful emperor by the name of Gilgamesh decided to go against the gods. He built a mighty chariot with stretched wings and flew up to the clouds to face the gods in armed combat. When he arrived, he challenged the big and mighty beings to a duel of power. The gods scoffed at him, being so small in comparison to their giant forms, and spoke in ancient tongues. "Who are you to face us, the gods? We created you, and all around you." To which the emperor responded, "Who are you to challenge man, who has domain over your every creature, who lives and endures always, no matter how bad the floods get? Who fashions things not made by even the gods?" And the gods did quiver at this, seeing what danger they created. And the emperor took one last glare at them, before he smote each and every one of them with his magic staff, watching him cower in fear. When he was done, he did look at his subjects and say, "Thy gods are defeated, there will be no more rain," and there was much excitement around every corner. But the rain was made for a reason, and wildfires sprung around every corner, and the many were thirsty for the liquid that once fell on their arid land. "Save us, Emperor Gilgamesh!" they shouted with all their might. The emperor heard their pleas, and went to the last living god to ask him for forgiveness, Death himself. And so there he was, asking for the power to control the weather, and Death struck up a deal. "I will teach you, if I am granted just one wish." The emperor was humbled. "Anything. My servants will be allowed to be present anywhere, at any time. They will reside under any rock, animal, tree, and man, and they will be invincible, especially to man." The emperor consented, and it was done. So, To this day, children, thy servants of death reside beside us, waiting for their moment to seize us, waiting for us to die. Number 1. The Angel of Industry. In a barren mountain range in northern Europe is a secluded cave. Deep inside is a wide chamber that appears to have been used in ancient rituals. The walls of the roughly circular space are densely covered in cave paintings. At first glance, they seem much like those found in other caves in that part of Europe, rendered in red and brown ochres. Look closely, however, and you will see that the most common figures depicted are subtly non-human. They are humanoid, but slightly hunched, and while it is hard to be sure owing to the primitive style of the art, each figure appears to have 2 short, conical horns on its head, and a hint of a tail. Look more closely still, and you will find some more traditionally drawn human figures. They are being hunted by the others, run through with spears, battered with stone axes. In some scenes, the horned figures appear to be roasting humans over open fires, or feasting on human-looking limbs. The paintings are disquieting, but they are just old pictures. The scenes they depict happened countless years ago, if they even happen at all. A determined traveler seeking shelter from a blizzard might decide to ignore the paintings and make camp. He may even light a fire. A well-used fire pit lies at the center of the room, slightly raised on a natural mound. Should a fire be lit there, wavering shadows will be cast onto the painted walls. For many, seeing their own silhouette superimposed on those eerie paintings will be the last straw, driving them to try their luck outside with the snow. Others will stay. Sometimes, nothing will happen. These lucky travelers will emerge the next morning, haggard from a night filled with half-remembered nightmares, anxious but alive. Other times, shadows will move on those walls, shadows cast by nobody present in the room. The wavering firelight will blur their outlines, make them hard to pick out, and some observers may believe them to be a trick of the light. Watch closely though, and you will see that the shadows resemble hunched figures, perhaps with small horns, and maybe a hint of a stubby tail behind them. These figures will gravitate toward the shadows of those who are taking shelter in the cave. They may appear to stand over their sleeping forms. They may appear to be holding weapons like spears or rough axes. Often, a lone traveler sheltering in the cave will never be seen or heard from again. Their fate will remain unknown. However, those traveling in a group will be woken by screams in the night. They will look for the source of the screams and find that one of their number is missing, their bedroll empty. If they happen to look at just the right place on the wall, they may see the wavering shadows of figures who are not present in the room, or at least not visible. The fire will be low and red, so the shadows dim and soft-edged, but it will appear that a struggling form is being speared and clubbed by multiple assailants, and then dragged away, out of the circle of firelight. The screams will fade slowly, seeming to sink into the rocks themselves. And is that a new cave painting on the wall the next morning? Surely not. The ochre it is painted in is just as old and as dry as all the rest. No, that picture of a man being gutted by horned figures must have always been there. And there we are. We've made it through each of these 10 bone-chilling stories. The journey is complete, and I am very proud of you. It is good to be back. Thank you all for joining me for yet another year of Creepypastas. I really do appreciate it. And hey, if you haven't gotten enough spooky vibes this evening, I have another suggestion. A little while ago, my friends over at Dep Films put together a suspenseful short film called Forbidden Zone Distortion, and they let me star in it as the main character. The film follows a lone scavenger exploring a heavily irradiated area of Sweden and discovering unknown horrors within. It is a short film that I think turned out great, and I am very proud of it, so hey, if you're interested, go check it out in the description below. It's perfect for a Halloween viewing. The guys over at Dep Films are incredibly talented people, and I am honored to call them my closest friends. So hey, there's that. It has been a long year, and I am glad to be back. I'm really grateful you joined me for this video. I really am. Talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay awesome. Goodbye.